My name is Arthur Milligan and I am 103 years old. I say that not to impress you, because at my age, I have very little left to prove to anyone. What I'm about to tell you was not learned from a book or a lecture or some motivational stage somewhere. Every single word came from living, from failing, from sitting right here in this chair in the quiet of a long life. I want to talk to you today about retirement, but not the kind where you calculate your savings. I want to talk about a different kind of retirement, the kind you finally stop carrying the weight of things that were never serving you. I want to talk about what you need to sell, not your house, not your car, not your stocks. But the invisible things, the habits, the beliefs, the fears, the obsessions you've held so tightly for years. I have buried a wife. I have buried a son. I have watched friends go before me, one by one, like candles being blown out. And I have sat on this chair more than I care to count. And in those rooms, in the quiet, I have heard a pattern, not always in words, sometimes just a silence. The look of a person who realizes far too late that they spent the best years of their life fighting battles that did not matter, protecting an image that no one was really watching, and waiting to truly live until everything was perfectly arranged. And it never was. It never is. So today I'm going to share 10 things with you. 10 things I believe every person must sell, must genuinely let go of before they retire. Most of these things I did not sell. I held on to some of them well into my 70s and my 80s. When I finally let them go, the relief was so great, so immense. I actually sat down and cried, not because I was sad, but because I had not realized how heavy they were until I put them down. So please settle in. I have been waiting a long time to tell someone this. The first thing I want you to sell is your ego. I do not mean your confidence or your self-respect. Those are different things entirely, and they are worth keeping. I mean the part of you that needs to be seen as right. More important to right than to actually be well. The part that walks into a room and quietly calculates. Are they noticing me? Do I matter here? The part that rehearses conversations again and again. Not to communicate better, but to win. I carried mine for most of my adult life, like a gold watch, worn with pride, and the quiet hope that others would notice. I was good at my work. I knew I was. And I let that knowing harden over time. Something less forgiving, less patient. My wife, Elena, God rest her. She would correct me gently. I listened with my face while my mind worked, building the counter-argument before she even finished. I was not listening to understand. I was listening to respond. And there is a world of difference between those two things. I was 71 when someone finally told me, "You are the smartest man in most rooms, and you make sure everyone knows it." And because of that, no one tells you the truth anymore. It was when I got home that very evening and I sat in this very chair and I did not speak for a long time because he was right. And the worst part was I had known it for years. This world tells you, you must be the authority. That being wrong is the same as being weak. But here is what I know. After 103 years, the most respected men and women were not the ones with all the answers. They were the ones who asked the best questions. They made you feel heard, seen. When your ego fills the room, no one else can fit. Sell your ego before it costs you your relationships. Elena stayed, but she deserved better. It took me 30 years to become that man. If you want real peace, not silence, but warmth, you do not retire from ego. You sell it every morning. When you wake up, remind yourself, today I will listen.
The second
Today I am
and
here
it
to
lives
learn,
very close to the first one,
not respond.
is your obsession with being right. Now, these two are neighbours, ego and rightness, but they are not the same thing. The ego is about image. This one is about control, because needing to be right is really just a quiet way of refusing to trust anyone else with the map. I remember a particular argument with my son David when he was in his early 30s. He had made a decision about his career, one I disagreed with completely. I thought it was reckless. I told him so. And then I told him again. And then I found ways to bring it up in conversations that had nothing to do with it. I was right, you understand. In a technical, factual, observable sense, I was probably right. He was taking a risk that did not pan out the way he hoped, at least not at first. But here is the thing. Even when I was proved right, I did not feel like a good father in those years. I felt like a man who had chosen being right over being close, and those are two very different victories, and only one of them matters. David and I repaired things. We did, eventually, but we lost time. We lost years of real closeness, because I could not bring myself to say, I trust you, son. Make your choice. I am here either way. Those words would have cost me nothing. Saying them would have given him the one thing every child, even a grown child, needs from a parent: to be believed in. I gave him my opinion instead, and opinions, no matter how accurate, cannot replace love. In retirement, in the long, quiet years that come at the end of a working life, you will find yourself in rooms with the people who matter most, and in those rooms, the old arguments have a way of coming back, old disagreements, old wounds that never fully closed, and you will have a choice every single time. You can be right, or you can be close. You can dig in, or you can reach out. You can win the argument and sit in your correctness, cold and alone, or you can let it go and step towards someone who needed you to do that for years. Being right is the most expensive habit I know. It costs you humility, it costs you intimacy, and over a long enough life, it will cost you the very relationships you thought you were protecting by maintaining your standards. Sell the obsession. Replace it with curiosity. When someone disagrees with you, your spouse, your child, your friend, instead of preparing your rebuttal, try asking one honest question. Just one. Help me understand how you see it. That question has saved more relationships than any apology I have ever witnessed, and I have witnessed many. The third thing to sell is the need to impress people, and this one, I will warn you, runs very deep. It starts early, somewhere around the age when you first realise that other people have opinions about you. and that those opinions seemed to matter enormously. And from that moment, for many of us, a quiet second life begins. A performance, really, running alongside the real one. I grew up with very little. My father was a labourer. We were not poor enough to be desperate, but we were close enough to poverty that I could feel its breath on the back of my neck all through my childhood. And I made myself a promise, somewhere around 14 years old, that I would become someone, that I would have a house and a car and a career that announced itself when I walked into a room. And I did. By my 40s I had most of those things, and I spent a tremendous amount of energy making sure people knew it. I would invite people to the house, not just because I wanted their company, though I did, but because I wanted them to see the house. I would mention my projects at dinner in ways that were carefully designed to sound casual, but were not casual at all. My wife used to catch my eye across the table in those moments, with a look that was not unkind, but was very honest. She never said anything. She did not have to. I knew what the look meant, and the exhausting part, the part that took me decades to fully see, is that I was working so hard to impress people who were largely too busy worrying about their own impressions to pay more than a moment's attention to mine. We are all, most of us, walking through the world hoping to be seen, and believing we are being watched far more carefully than we actually are. It is one of the great shared delusions of human social life. The moment I truly started letting this go, and it was a gradual thing, like releasing air from a balloon slowly rather than all at once, was when Eleanor was ill. Not fatally, but seriously enough that life contracted. Everything that was not essential fell away, and I found myself spending whole evenings just sitting with her, not doing anything particularly impressive, not producing anything, not performing anything, just being there. And something in me relaxed that I had not realized was always tensed. In the quiet of those evenings, with no audience and nothing to prove, I felt more like myself than I had in years, perhaps ever. And I thought, why did it take an illness to bring me here? Why did it take the contraction of life for me to stop running toward the approval of people I barely knew and sit still with the person I loved most in the world? You do not need people to be impressed by you. You need people to love you, and love, real love, the deep, durable kind, is almost never impressed by the same thing the crowd is impressed by. Love is impressed by your patience, by your honesty, by the way you show up on an ordinary Tuesday when there is nothing special happening and nothing to gain. The fourth thing, this one is painful for me to say. Sell your obsession with work, or more precisely, sell the belief that your work is your worth. I worked hard. I worked constantly. I worked on weekends when I should have been at David's school events. I worked late on evenings when Eleanor had made dinner and waited and then eaten alone. I worked through summer holidays, through anniversaries, through the small, unremarkable weekends that turn out, when you look back, to be the very fabric of a life. I told myself I was doing it for them, that the security I was building was a form of love, and there was some truth in that, but only some. The larger truth, the one I could not face for too long, was that I worked so much because I was afraid of what I would find in the silence if I stopped. Work gave me identity, structure, purpose, and an endless supply of small satisfactions that were much easier to obtain than the deep, complicated, sometimes painful satisfactions of being fully present in my own home. A solved problem at the office was clean and clear. A solved problem in a marriage or with a teenager was messy, uncertain, and I was better, for a very long time, at choosing the clean work over the messy real life. And then I retired at 68, and for the first 8 months I was genuinely at a loss. I did not know what to do with myself. I would wake up at 6 in the morning, out of pure habit, and sit in this very chair, with a coffee I had made by rote, and stare at a day that had no structure in it. The achievement was gone. The identity was gone. And what I found in that silence was something I had been avoiding my whole adult life. The question of who I was when I was not producing anything. That question is the most important question of your later years. And the earlier you begin to answer it, the better, because if you arrive at retirement without any answer, without any sense of who you are when the job is taken away, it can break you. I have watched it break strong men. Men who built things, led companies, commanded rooms, and then they retired and they shrank. Not because they were weak, but because they had unknowingly placed their entire self inside the container of their career. And when the career ended, they could not find themselves anywhere. Your work is something you do. It is not something you are. And the sooner you can feel the difference between those two things, not just understand it intellectually, but actually feel it, the sooner you can build a self that will survive the end of your working years with something warm still left inside it, something that belongs to you and not to any employer or client or deadline. The fifth thing is toxic pride, and I want to be careful here because I believe in pride, in the healthy kind. The pride you feel when you look at something you built well, when you watch your child become a person of character, when you hold to your values under pressure. That kind of pride is a compass. I am not asking you to sell that. I am asking you to sell the other kind. The pride that will not let you apologize. The pride that would rather let a relationship bleed slowly than admit a fault. The pride that makes asking for help feel like dying. My father was a proud man in the toxic sense. He never once in my entire childhood apologized for anything. Not to my mother, not to me or my brothers, not to anyone. It was not that he never did anything wrong. He did, as all of us do. It was that something in him had decided that admitting fault was beneath a man of his standing, and that standing was, to be clear, not particularly grand. He was a proud man with a modest life, and the pride was the most expensive thing he owned. I inherited that pride. I thought for years that it was strength. It is not strength. Strength is being able to look someone in the eye and say, I was wrong, I am sorry. You deserved better than what I gave you. That is one of the hardest things a human being can say, and it requires enormous reserves of genuine courage. Pretending you were never wrong requires nothing at all, except a determined avoidance of your own interior. I apologized to Eleanor on our 45th wedding anniversary. I took her hands, and I sat across from her, and I said, I have not been the husband I should have been, not always, and I am sorry, not as a formality. I am genuinely sorry. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, very quietly, I know. I know you are. And then she squeezed my hands, and that was all. But something between us shifted in that moment that I cannot fully explain. Something that had been held at a slight, almost imperceptible distance for years, just closed. Over one honest sentence, 45 years. That is how long I carried the pride that kept me from saying it. And it took no more than 15 seconds to say, "You tell me if that is a good trade." The sixth thing, and here I have something of an advantage over most of you, is the fear of aging. I have arrived at the far end of it, and I am still here. So let me tell you what I see from this side. Most people spend an enormous amount of energy in their middle years fighting the fact that they are aging. They fight it in the mirror, in the doctor's office, in conversations where they add qualifiers to their age. I'm 53, but people say I look 45, as though those 8 years were a moral failing they need to explain away. They fight it by keeping the same pace they kept at 35, when their body is trying to tell them something different. They fight it by refusing to think about mortality, about limitation, about the natural shortening of things, until one day the body makes the conversation unavoidable. I understand the fear. I had it myself. In my 50s, when things began to slow, when the recovery from effort took longer, when I noticed the first deep lines settling into my face, I felt something I can only describe as a quiet grief. Not grief for youth exactly. I had not been particularly attached to being young. It was more a grief for the feeling of limitlessness. The feeling that there was still time for everything, that nothing was truly foreclosed yet, that the horizon was still broad and open. But here is what aging actually gave me, when I stopped fighting it and began walking toward it instead. It gave me clarity. The older I got, the less I wasted on things that did not matter. Not because I became wise automatically. I want to be clear that wisdom is not guaranteed by years. You have to work for it, but because time became more obviously finite, and finite things demand that you become more selective. When you know the river is shortening, you stop spending water on things that lead nowhere. At 103, I do not fear the end. I'm honest enough to admit that surprises me. I expected to become more afraid as I got closer. Instead, I've found something closer to curiosity, a quiet interest in what all of this has been, and a deep, settled gratitude for having had the chance to be here at all. For as long as I have been with the people I have been able to love. If you are in your 50s or 60s, and you are gripping the side of the boat because you do not want to feel it moving, I want to tell you this: let go of the side. You are not going to stop the movement, but if you let go, if you stop fighting the current, you will have both hands free, and 2 free hands can do a great deal.
The 7th thing I want you to sell is your grudges. I held a grudge against my older brother, Malcolm, for most of my adult life. It felt like a profound betrayal, and maybe it was. I kept it for 30 years. And I sat at his funeral and I saw clearly what exactly did I win. Grudges feel like protection, but they punish you more than anyone else. Selling a grudge does not mean opening a door, it means choosing your peace. Most of the time, they have moved on entirely, and you're the one keeping the lights on. You're sitting alone in the room of an old argument, keeping the hurt alive. A grudge punishes you far more than it punishes anyone else. Now, this does not mean you restore every relationship. Some people truly disqualify themselves, and that is a reasonable conclusion. Selling a grudge does not mean opening a door. It means setting down the weight inside yourself. It means choosing your peace over the performance of an anger that is no longer doing you any good. The eighth thing is subtle. Sell the life you thought you were supposed to have. We all carry a picture of how life was meant to go. The career, the marriage, the person we thought we'd be. Life always diverges for everyone. When it does, there is grief, sometimes very quiet, a sadness you don't name, but feel every day. I had a picture once. I was going to be an architect. Life moved quickly. I chose what was practical. I don't regret that life. Not truly. But the other life stayed, like a ghost. It cost you quietly an unlived dream. Not sadness, not envy, something in between. In those moments, I wasn't present. The life you were supposed to have is just a story. Reality owes you nothing. It gives what it gives. This is the life, not a rehearsal. When I accepted that, everything became clear. I stopped comparing. I was just here. The ninth thing is something I suspect you will recognize. Before I even finish explaining it, sell busyness as an identity. Sell a badge of being occupied. There is a particular kind of person, and I was this person, who measures their own value by how busy they are. Who feels vaguely guilty when not producing, not moving, not contributing towards something measurable, and who has difficulty sitting in a garden and simply watching the light change without the feeling they should be doing something with their time, something useful, something that justifies the minutes being spent. This is one of the cruelest things that working life does to a person. It trains you to equate motion with worth and stillness with waste. And then retirement arrives. And suddenly you have this great ocean of unstructured time. And instead of finding it restful, you find it threatening. Because somewhere along the way, you internalize the idea that your value is directly proportional to your output. And when the output stops, the fear begins. Ilona was better at this than I was. She could sit in the garden on an afternoon with a cup of tea and simply be without agenda, without a task, just to live in that particular quality of a Tuesday afternoon in late spring. And I will come out to join her, and perhaps 7 minutes before something in me started to age, some restless engine that needed to be running. And I would find a reason to go back inside and do something. Anything at all that can be done. I did not learn to sit in the garden until I was 85. I am telling you that because I want you to understand that this habit runs deep and does not release easily. And the earlier you begin to practice the quiet, the better. Because the quiet is where life actually lives, the busyness. The 10th thing, the last one, and I saved this for last, because it is the one that costs the most to say, and the one that I believe carries the most weight. and any of them sell the silence around love. Sell a habit of feeling of deeply and expressing it poorly. Or not at all. Sell the assumption that the people you love know that you love them. Because the love obvious to you from the inside. My son David, I have mentioned him. David and I came close in his 40s. After the years of friction had passed, and we had both gotten older and softer in the ways that friction eventually smooth, we became genuinely good friends, which is the best thing a favor on an adult son can become, I think. We spoke on the telephone every week. We had long dinners. We took work together and talked about things that mattered, but never told David, not clearly, not plainly, not in the direct language that such a thing deserves. I never told him what he meant to me. I showed in ways I think he knew, but I never looked at him and said, "You are one of the great joys of my life. You are one of the things I'm most proud of, not your achievements. You, the person you became." I never said those exact words in that order. While looking him in the eyes, David died at 79. A stroke. It was fast. He was gone before I could get there. And I sat beside him in the hospital ramp after. Then I said all of it, and I am grateful I said it even then. Even when he could not hear it, because something in the saying of it felt necessary. But I will carry on till my last day the wish that I had said it, while he was looking back at me. If something I said today landed somewhere real in you, somewhere quiet that needed to hear it, I want to ask you something small. Tell one person something true this week, not a compliment, just something real. Something true, something you have been meaning to say, and have not quite gotten around to saying. That is all I'm asking. One true thing to one real person. Do that, and you will have done more good today than most people manage in a month. And if this conversation meant something to you, share it. Not because of numbers or any of that, but because there is someone in your life, a parent, a friend, a colleague, approaching the end of their working years, who needs to hear this. Carrying something heavy and not knowing yet that they are allowed to put it down. Send it to them. Let it be the thing you said today that you did not quite know how to say yourself. Leave a comment below with one thing you are going to sell first. I read every one. I do. This little community is full of people doing exactly this work. Getting lighter, getting honest, getting present. You belong here. And if this is the first time you have sat with me by this fire, there are more stories where this one came from, true ones, the kind worth sitting still for. Thank you.